Namaskar and welcome to this exciting new show with a very favorite guest. And we all love him, all his talks. All of you have loved his talks. And by popular demand, he's back. And this time we are going to share something what you have always asked for. And I'm going to put it in a different way. Faith is what we live on. Fiction is what we enjoy. So let us hear from him directly. Let us welcome His Holiness Bhakti Rasamrita Maharaj from India. Hare Krishna. So Maharaj, there is a huge when people hear your talks again and again, and all your talks have crossed 5,000 views each. And so one thing which people are want to talk about is faith. So how do you define faith?
Faith is something sublime. Faith is a strong conviction that something is true, or that by following something, then a very beneficial and wholesome result will be achieved. So depending on what it is that we have faith in, that faith can either be sublime or it can be something very mundane or gross. So generally we talk of faith in spiritual subjects, but faith is a term that is also very commonly used in our day-to-day discourse. It comes in all our relationships with people and phenomena in this world. So faith is something that cuts across all departments of life, so to speak. So essentially, to conclude then, I would say that faith is a strong conviction in something, in the truth of something, or in the prospect of that object or entity providing something very wholesome and beneficial for us.
So Maharaj, then one question comes to my mind is, what kind of faith people can have? What are the different types of faith they can have?
Well, if you look at it from the point of view of the Bhagavad Gita, the ancient Vedic text, then the kinds of faith can be seen in terms of the three modes of material nature: the mode of goodness, the mode of passion, and the mode of ignorance. Now, anything and everything in this world can be analyzed in terms of these three modes. And are you there?
Yes.
Sorry?
Yes, we're there.
I think we got cut for a moment here.
Yes. Please continue.
So I was saying that anything and everything in this world can be analyzed in terms of the three modes of material nature. So also with faith. So faith is something that brings us peace, knowledge, joy. Faith that is based on truth, that is faith in the mode of goodness. So basically that's something that's on the level of spirituality, or that's something that takes us to spirituality. Faith in the mode of passion is that which is stimulated by strong passions and desire for some enjoyment or for some material rewards in this world. And faith in the mode of ignorance is that which is completely blind, which is based on ignorance, and which ends in great harm and devastation. It results in violence, in cruelty, in anger, and so on. So broadly, I would say, from the point of view of Bhagavad Gita, these are the three ways in which one can classify faith. It's important to point out, Adi Guru Prabhu, at this stage that, regardless of whether we're believers in God or in spirituality or not, everybody has faith in something or someone. Faith is something essential for our very survival. From the smallest things in life to very deep philosophical things, faith is required. Even in science, there is faith in a certain methodology, there is faith in a certain process, in the senses, and in what our intelligence can deduce. In everyday life, we put our faith in our cars, in the aircraft, and the pilots, and the airline company. When we take a medicine, we put faith in the pharmaceutical company. So, in every small and large action in life, there is a faith that is implied or it may be explicit also, but it's there. At the back of our mind, it is there. So, the idea that we can distinguish religion or spirituality as faith and everything else as reason or rationality, I think is not really true.
I think very good answer actually, because people get really often confused by faith, and they keep the rationality out of the place of worship. But what I heard over the last few days by many people, they have expressed Sanatana Dharma as a science. So that it's a science as well as a faith as well as the belief. So then the important question comes to our mind is, what is the difference between a faith and a belief?
Well, if you're defining a faith as a religious faith, like say, any particular religious faith, then uh, it is temporary because then you can change it. Today, you profess a certain religious affiliation, you ascribe to a certain religious faith, but tomorrow you could well change that to some other faith. So, in the context of a religious faith, I would say the word faith is something that is changeable, it is temporary. Um, Whereas a science, and we prefer to believe uh, the Sanatana Dharma as a science, and then we place faith in that science. So there is faith there, but the foundation for that faith is also something very sublime. So a science is something that is always true. It doesn't change. Yes, you can use the certain principles of science to apply it to in different situations, but uh, you can't change it. For example, the law of gravity. You have faith in the law of gravity, and therefore you don't step out of a window or a balcony of your first floor of your house. But still, it's a science because it works everywhere. It doesn't change. Even if I stop believing in the law of gravity will still act. So I can't say, well, I've stopped believing in the law of gravity. I don't have faith in the law of gravity anymore. You know, I can say that about religious faith. That today I don't ascribe to this religious faith. I ascribe to that religious faith. But when we're speaking of something that is sanatan, which means eternal, we are speaking of something that is enduring, that is changeless, that is truly scientific in the real sense of the term.
Very good answer, Swamiji, and I think it will resonate with a lot of people here. One of the questions that I'm getting from the audience is right now is that how do they determine which faith is the best? So either faith in themselves is the best, or faith in someone else is the best. So how do they determine which faith is the best if a person has to choose? And I think most of the people, what I think, what the questioner is asking is that she is asking not from a religious perspective, she's just asking from a faith in general. And I think you already explained the faith of three types. So this is one question: which faith is the best generally?
Faith that eventually leads to our spiritual upliftment, faith that is conducive for spiritual development, faith that leads to an overall harmony between us and everything around us, faith that helps to create an atmosphere of true joy and peace. That kind of faith is the best. And to know what it is that can produce such a faith, I would say it is the company or association of people, appropriate people. You know, faith begets faith. So if we want to have the best kind of faith, the faith that is sublime, the faith that fulfills the characteristics that I just mentioned now, then we have to associate with people who have that kind of faith. And then we can also imbibe that. We may not have that faith in the beginning, but if we have an open mind and we understand that there is a very sound basis for that faith, then we become more encouraged to actually adopt that faith or to take it up and to place our faith in that particular process or object or person or whatever.
Yeah, very good point. And Maharaj, many people have been listening to your videos. In the past, you have spoken about meditation on Krishna, and you have spoken about Ram on your channel. So one of the things which the viewers they ask is, they've seen also the historicity aspect which you spoke on, where how historical is the proof. One of the questions which the students they have in the mind is, in the faith versus fiction category, so the many descriptions in those books, most of these students are graduate students or postgraduate students or PhD students. So many of the descriptions, I'm looking on the side because I just need to read what the texts are coming in. So the descriptions over there, like one particular description they talk about is Jambu Dweep, and the mangoes of the size of elephants. So now, are they allegorical or are they based on factual? How do people read that?
You know, faith is a gradual process. It's something like building a structure, like construction work. It goes step by step. You start from the foundation, and then once the foundation is strong, then you have the ground floor and then the first floor, and then that's how the structure moves up. So, similarly, our faith has to progress like this step by step. Now, there are many things that may appear outrageous to the modern educated mind, uh, completely out of sync with what appears to be experience or logic or rationality and so on. But of course, the point is that our experience is very limited. We are prone to committing mistakes. Our senses are also uh, very, very incomplete. Their, their range is very small. So there is much to learn in this world on the gross platform as well as the subtle platform. So I would say that rather than focusing on such things, which, although true, are not the essential features of the teachings. That is not the crux of the philosophy. When we build up our faith strongly in the foundational principles of the philosophy, in the building blocks of the philosophy, so to speak, the basics, then gradually, the faith builds. And then we are able to see the other things that may be mentioned in the scripture through the eyes of the scripture. The scripture has to be seen through its own eyes. The problem arises when we try to analyze scripture through the eyes of mundane intelligence or mundane rationality, or from the point of view of our experience of this world, which in any case is very limited. So, I would suggest that it's important to start from the basics, understand basic principles like the soul and the body, have strong conviction about the existence of the soul, about reincarnation, about the principle of karma, about God, about the creation and how it's done, the process of creation, what is the necessity of scripture, the Bhagavad Gita, scriptures like the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Upanishads and the Puranas. Why is it important to study these, and why do we consider these to be the truth? So moving up from the basics like that, then if we build our faith, then the other things, they are not very important. So even though they are true and they may seem outrageous to us, but it doesn't really bother us so much because we have a very strong foundation now. So therefore, I would suggest that instead of focusing on these for now, it's better to focus on the basics, and then things will come step by step.
Yeah, thank you. And I think for the questionnaire, I would like to say is that there are some other videos on this channel by Swamiji, so you can access it over there, and I can forward you the links after the show. One another question that comes to the mind is, with all the protests in the US happening over which many of the students, they are part of it, and so uh, where does the faith stand there with all the protests happening on Black Lives Matter and other things happening, which students obviously feel very strongly about it, and they want to. So it's a general. I would say it's a good heart intention by on behalf of the students that they care about what's happening in the society. How does faith help them judge whether they're doing right or wrong, or faith or belief? So that's the question they have. So are they doing right or wrong? How do they know?
Yeah. Okay, Adipur Prabhu, can I just switch my internet dongle? I'm having some difficulty. That's why I was late in joining. So if you just give me 15 seconds or 10 seconds, I'll rejoin you. I have some technical issues here. I'm trying to resolve them. Okay, I'm back.
Yes.
Yeah, and I hope this will not give us any further problems. Yeah, sorry, please continue. You were asking about the protests.
Yeah. So
And
yes, how does faith guide people, the students, whether they're doing the right thing or the wrong thing? Because many of them are making this decision with a lot of propaganda around them, and it's also well funded also. So students want to know like whether they're doing the right thing or the wrong thing.
in one sense, these protests, insofar as the youth in the universities are involved, is something natural that I guess all of us go through as students. It's an age where you want to explore things, you want to really understand things, you want to challenge things. And so it's natural that there will be. Uh, I'm not referring to any specific issue on which the protests are held, whatever be the issue, but it's a natural age where we want to be a little revolutionary in nature, and so we can be also very idealistic, So this is a phase in life that most people go through. Um, Now, so that's one part of it. So I don't think we should blame anybody for having participated, because it's just the natural process of evolving in this world. And your thoughts, your opinions, your perceptions, your convictions, they all grow with time, with the experiences we have, the kind of people we talk to, the things we see and hear. So, and there is much in this world that is not right. So naturally, there will be protests. So I'm not against the principle of protest, because uh, it's it's something that is natural, and perhaps a civilized society, uh, in trying to find its bearings and in navigating to get onto the right path in the right direction, there will be such movements and such activities happening. So that's one thing. Coming to whether what should be the foundation of such protests, I would say that uh, intention must be backed by knowledge. Now, once again, I want to emphasize that I'm not referring to any particular protest against any particular phenomenon or activity or episode or whatever. I'm just making a general point that actions must be motivated by good intentions and also by knowledge. Then actions attain completeness and they become salubrious or wholesome or beneficial for everybody. If an action is done with knowledge but with a bad intention, it will have a bad result. If an action is done with a good intention but without knowledge, that will also have a bad result. So if actions are done with good intention and with good knowledge, then that will lead to a completely wholesome and beneficial result. So the question arises, given that we have good intention, what kind of knowledge are we speaking about? So we are speaking about knowledge that is in the mode of goodness, knowledge that is spiritual, that will lead us towards a spiritual platform. So when we're equipped with this kind of spiritual knowledge, then it enables us to develop a unique perspective towards phenomena and events in this world. It gives us a certain very clear-headed vision about what is what. This is the benefit of spiritual knowledge, that it gives you clarity about what is what, about what is important, what isn't so important, uh, what is right, what is not right. Now, it doesn't mean that you will know all the details factually of some particular incident or whatever. That is not the level at which I'm speaking. I'm speaking at a level wherein we are able to understand the bigger picture, the broader canvas on which the events of this world unfold inscrutably according to the process of the laws of nature and destiny and the karma and individuality and expression of people and so on. So by developing spiritual knowledge, one gets a very clear understanding about things. One also learns to balance things. What happens sometimes is that there is a chance that people may get carried away to some extreme or the other. But what is really sustainable is that which is balanced. Balance is a very important word. If we try to go towards extremes one way or the other, it will always cause disruption and instability. And then it will also cause um, conflict. So spiritual knowledge not only gives us the perspective, but it also gives us that sense of balance to put things in their proper place and not get carried away too much with any one thing and see things in relation to each other, and to see that there are always other sides of the story, and to put the whole picture together. That kind of a complete holistic vision is afforded by one who has spiritual knowledge. I know it's a very general answer, but I think I want to keep it like that.
No, it's. I think you hit the nail. It's without taking any names, you have actually answered the question. And Margaret is asking that question, and she's thankful for that. Now, there's another. In Swamiji, today we are having a rapid fire with you, but thank you for your patience with everyone here, and
That's
that's was a large audience here today. So one of the things which people are asking is, or some, I won't say people, but I would say it's a general question for all of them. See, you spoke about Krishna and Ram in your earlier meditation on Krishna is one topic we had covered one time. And you spoke many things about historicity over there. Their question is that they have never heard that name in their literatures. And how come, if he was such a big person, his name is not there in their literatures? That is one of the questions we have. You can choose to answer or not answer.
no, I won't duck any questions. You can feel free to ask me anything. Uh, so, yes, you know, uh, the events that we're speaking about and the personalities we are speaking about lived long ago, many, many years ago, thousands and thousands of years ago. And with time, things get forgotten. Uh, Even very, very noteworthy events, even cataclysmic events perhaps, just remain preserved in the memories and the cultures of a certain set of people. And then people spread out all over the world, and then they forget the original culture from which they came, right? Um, so let's look at the history of human migration all over the planet. So people migrated from one place to go to another place, and there's been a cross current of migration for centuries and centuries in all directions. Now, uh, certain people, they preserve the culture, their mother culture from where they came, but somehow as time goes by, then they tend to forget it because that emphasis is lost, that connection is lost, and then some new culture evolves, perhaps either independently because of disconnection from the mother culture, uh, and or because of connection with other people who have another culture, and you get assimilated into that, and you forget your mother culture, so to speak. Now consider this over a long time span, not just a few centuries, but thousands and even hundreds of thousands of years. So what you end up with is something that will be preserved only in a certain land, in a certain culture, amongst a certain type of people. So the histories of Ram and Krishna have been preserved in India with the Hindu faith for centuries and centuries. Somehow or the other, this has sustained. It has been protected and preserved. But people who have been in other lands, for centuries and centuries, and they have had no exposure to this. So naturally, when they grow up in their countries, in their lands, they don't hear anything about it. So it all depends on how they are brought up, how they're raised, what their educational system is, what their general knowledge is, what kind of things they are taught in school, at home, in the society, what things they see on the television, on the internet, and so on and so forth. You know, at least nowadays we have internet, so learning about distant cultures is relatively easy. But in the old days, it was very difficult to learn about cultures from distant lands. You had perhaps somebody coming there, and he was quite a novelty, and people would see like he was some kind of a specimen in the zoo or something, and they would see him like that, perhaps. Uh, so, because of that disconnection, the knowledge of other cultures was not there. It wasn't preserved. And I'll tell you another thing. I was mentioning this in another lecture for some devotees in the UK. And they asked this question about mythology and faith and so on in the scripture. So I spoke about briefly about a Scottish mathematician called John Craig, who lived a few centuries ago. He tried to apply the principles of mathematics to history and philosophy and religious studies. And it's quite interesting. Now, I'm not necessarily vouching for his, version or his conclusions, but I'm just saying that the basic general principle that he makes is interesting. He says that when a particular event occurs, even if it's a very, very important event, then depending on certain criteria, that event is more or less likely to be forgotten. What are the criteria? One is time. The longer the time period that elapses, between the event and the person who is trying to discuss that event, the longer that is, the larger the probability that it will be considered mythology or false. The second is distance. The more further away you are in space, geographically, the more you are disconnected from that, and therefore you tend to think of that as being something false. Similarly, also, there could be other criteria like, how close is the person who's describing the events to the events themselves. Was he a first-hand witness? Was he a second-hand witness? Was he a third-hand witness? What is the means by which that information was transmitted? So he did his own calculations, etc. And one of the conclusions he reached was that by 3100 AD, everybody will believe that Jesus Christ was mythology. Okay, so because that was his calculation. Now, believing Christians, they believe that Jesus Christ was a historical personality. And personally, as far as I'm concerned, I have no quarrel with that, no issue with that. We respect Jesus Christ as a Son of God. So we have no problem at all in accepting that historical personality or event of his birth and so on. But as time goes by, but today there are also many, many people questioning the historicity of Jesus. Now, Ram and Krishna way, way, way back in the past. So when people are questioning Jesus, who was only 2,000 years ago, you can imagine how much more natural it is that people are going to question the historicity of events and personalities who existed years and thousands of years before that. So a time will come in 3100, according to his calculation, that more or less everybody will think that this is mythology, that Jesus is just a mythological character. So we must keep that in mind. So these are all the different reasons why people grow up in different lands not hearing about someone or something.
Yes, that's why we call Ram and Krishna Sattology, because of archaeological evidence, astronomical evidence, and all those things. We call Ramayana Mahabharata Sattology. Now, one of the next questions come to the mind is to one of the next questions coming to from the students is coming is that the belief system in India is totally opposite of the belief system of Abrahamic faith. There is no correlation, and his point is that so how can the two belief systems ever talk, because the people are wired differently in the brain.
Well, that is more a result of how things are presented. If you look at the pure teachings, there are many commonalities, right? Even let's say the Bible and the Bhagavatam, the whole idea of uh, the incarnation of Matsya, the fish incarnation of God, rescuing a king called Satyavrat, and there was a boat on which the king and his family and sages uh, they sat on it, and then they gathered herbs and plants and seeds and everything, and there were waters of devastation all over the planet. And God incarnated in the form, Lord Krishna incarnated in the form of a fish, the Matsya avatar, the fish incarnation. And he steered that boat safely through the waters of devastation. And then when the waters subsided, then civilization began anew. And with those herbs and those seeds and so on, a new civilization was begun. There are similar things in the Bible about Noah's Ark, striking parallels, similarities. So if you really look at it, there are many, many such commonalities and striking parallels in the between so many phenomenon events that are described in different cultures all over the world. So it points to the fact, it points in the direction that there was some common culture that existed universally a long, long, long time ago. And when people spread out all over, then certain parts of the original narrative were kind of lost, and they became, uh, uh, or rather, those narratives then kind of morphed into something else, a little different. There were variations of those that came up. And then, because they were cut off now, all the different cultures were disconnected from each other. So they all evolved over the period of time, and then uh, acquired a kind of a distinctive flavor. But certain commonalities remained. So that is why we actually understand that the Vedic culture, which is the most ancient, is actually the mother civilization, the mother culture of the entire globe. And Sanskrit is like the mother language from which all of the languages originated. So this is how I would see this. And yeah, it's a fascinating topic, but just a few thoughts on that. Yeah. I won't give too long an answer because then I know there are other questions.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. The one last question, and viewers, I'm calling him Maharaj. That's a respectful way of addressing him. So one way, one another question comes to the mind is and it's a kind of controversial. You can choose not to answer it also. That the one till recently, till 1960s, in Australia, and this question is coming from Melbourne. This somebody is watching in Melbourne. So till 1960, the Aborigines in Australia were considered under Flora and Fauna Act, which is not human. So they were considered part of the vegetation, animals, and other things. Until early 1930s and 40s, in the US, women did not have right to vote. I think it came in 1960 or 75, somewhere there they got the right to vote. And so that was the condition of women, particularly in these cultures, and in fact the humans also. And I want to touch about the other humans from other parts of the world who were treated not on par with the other humans which are there. I don't want to talk any color of the skin, so viewers must have got the hint by now. So what was the position in the Hindu culture or the Vedic Sanatana Dharma on these aspects?
It depends on what platform one is situated on, what platform of spiritual evolution one is on. From the Bhagavad Gita, there is a very nice verse um, in which Lord Krishna explains that a truly learned person is one who has equal vision. He sees an elephant or a dog or a Brahmin or a person who eats the dog, with equal vision because he sees the spiritual entity within all of them. He understands that they're basically spiritual entities. So he sees his vision is like that. However, it doesn't mean that he doesn't make a distinction. For example, a learned person like this would see that there is a tiger and there is a human being, uh, but he wouldn't go and shake hands with the tiger. While he sees that vision, but his dealings would be different because he would understand there's danger. The tiger is not in a frame of consciousness, a frame of mind, or a state of consciousness to be able to reciprocate with the man going up to shake his hand. Right? The tiger may probably maul him to death or something like that. So one views things from a philosophical point of view in a certain way, and one doesn't exploit, one doesn't mistreat, one is not cruel, one does not give pain to others, but distinctions may be made. Like we make a distinction between children and adults. Therefore, there are separate sets of laws for juveniles than for adults. So that doesn't mean that we consider children any less, but it's just that we make a distinction. So in the Vedic culture, distinctions were made, but not for the purpose of exploitation, not for the purpose of, uh, aggrandizement of a personal benefit and so on. But distinctions existed because they were natural. We just recognize natural distinctions. If we do not recognize natural distinctions, then you try to create an artificial situation of equality, which doesn't work. So we try to see that everyone needs compassion. Everyone needs opportunities to live a life of dignity, a life of opportunity, or to be happy, to attain the spiritual perfection of life, right? So each according to his or her own situation, they were encouraged. Now, when it came to your question was about certain countries where these rights or privileges were not accorded to certain sections of the society. Well, with time, I think societies have evolved, thinking has broadened and expanded, and people are understanding that they made a mistake. It wasn't right to treat the Aborigines as flora and fauna. Slavery wasn't right. So, as time goes by, people realize that um, what we did in the past wasn't necessarily correct. In fact, in many instances, those things are very bad. We should give them up. At the same time, I think there is some need for caution that there is something called momentum. When you start a process, it's like an avalanche. You roll a ball of snow down a hill, and then as it rolls down the hill, and if it's a very long slope, it gathers more and more snow and becomes a huge ball, and then it can smash everything down. It can be very destructive. So similarly, movements for restoring, um, shall we say, dignity and justice to people must be uh, also carefully handled. They're very noble. The human society, uh, if it's enlightened truly, must give dignity, justice, care, etc., to all its constituents. Yeah, but in the effort to do that and to turn away or to, shall we say, um, in an effort to deny the wrongs of the past and to reverse them, one has to be cautious. Go step by step, do it in a way that doesn't create a problem in itself. The solution should not be the cause of further problems. That is why I mentioned it needs the mode of goodness to solve problems.
Very,
The
very
mode of
important.
can go extreme, and it can also be destructive in ways that the votaries of change did not foresee. Unforeseen deleterious effects can come about if we are not governed by the mode of goodness, which gives us a cool head, which gives us a very spiritual and deep perspective to things. And eventually, as everybody becomes more spiritual, then naturally people become, compassionate by nature. They become loving by nature, kind, accommodating, big-hearted, and they have a broader vision of life. So that automatically comes with the development of spiritual culture.
Excellent point, Maharaj. I think our time is up. And thank you, students, for joining from all over the world. We crossed a record student count today. And thank you all for responding to our calls and coming on this show. We'll have Swamiji back in a few days. And till that time, the recording of this video will be out within 4 days. So you can again watch this show. And if you have any other questions, get ready for the next session. I'm going to shortly announce the topic. This was a last minute impromptu session. People wanted to get it done. But I know Swamiji for many years. He can answer many of your questions very easily. So I was not even worried about it. So thank you all. So we'll have the next session. And one of the topics which people have in mind is the bondage of karma. That's what we want to talk about. So maybe Swamiji, next session we focus on that in a couple of days when you have time. So viewers, thank you so much. On Saturday morning, you watched us from across the world, and thank you so much for Swamiji. It's so late for him that he has kindly come, and enlighten all of us. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.